And welcome back to the Wellness Paradox podcast. I'm so grateful that you can join us on this journey towards greater human flourishing. As always, I'm your host, Michael Stack, an exercise physiologist by training and a health educator and a health entrepreneur by trade. And I'm fascinated by a phenomena I call the wellness paradox. This paradox, as I view it, is the trust, communication, and interaction gap between fitness and wellness professionals and our medical community. This podcast is all about closing off that gap by giving fitness and wellness professionals the skills that they need to build stronger businesses, help more people, and have a fulfilling and sustainable career in the industry. And to do that in episode 38, I'm delighted to be joined by Debbie Bellenger. Debbie is a veteran of the fitness industry of several decades, and as her career has progressed, she's moved into the medical fitness and medical wellness space, particularly with her focus being on programming. And when I'm talking about programming here, I'm not talking about the traditional write an exercise prescription. I'm talking about programs to treat chronic diseases and disabilities, and to start to be more inclusive and approachable for the 80% of the population that don't typically go to health and fitness clubs. Debbie has a wealth of experience, and she's going to provide us a lot of that knowledge in this conversation. And I think the big thing you're going to walk away from the conversation with is some actionable steps to develop programming that's more inclusive, that can start to bring in the 80% of the population that isn't engaging with health and fitness clubs. Any information that we'd like to share from this episode can be found on the show notes page by going to wellnessparadoxpod.com/episode 38. Please enjoy this conversation with Debbie Bellenger. We're excited to be joined today by Debbie Bellenger. Debbie, thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the invite. I'm honored.
I'm very excited to have this conversation with Debbie. I first met Debbie down at the Medical Fitness Association conference in San Antonio this October, and I heard her give a great lecture on the difference between wellness and well-being and the transformation that's really happening in our industry right now. And I think it's going to be a fascinating discussion. But Debbie, before we get into our conversation, why don't you give everyone a little bit more of an idea of your background, just to provide some context for the discussion?
Sure. So I have grown up in the fitness, health, wellness industry, and very blessed in my career to have worked and grown up through fitness center operations, instructor, coordinator, general manager, to moving into a space of medical wellness, working for two hospital systems, one in South Carolina for 12 years as their first director of wellness, and then moved on to North Carolina to another hospital system as their first director of wellness that was a 9-year run. And that was a really integrated experience working with a healthcare system and connecting all the dots. So I've been very blessed within the career to work public, profit, governmental, all of the elements. I would say between you and me, Mike, the medical wellness piece, 22 years in that space, population health, serving those in need is truly my heart. I've grown up as I've gone through my career, but that's where my passion is.
Yeah, and I love the vastness of your experience. And that was the thing that I was first struck of when I heard you speak. And then when we talked afterwards, is you've really seen the evolution of fitness to medical fitness and medical wellness over the course of the past couple decades. Talk to our audience a little bit about the evolution that you've not only seen, but you've actually actively participated in.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I do think the industry has evolved and matured year over year. And clearly this past 18 months, almost 2 years, has thrown us into the stratosphere of evolution. I mean, it is beyond high speed. And I think it's a huge opportunity for the industry at large, commercial space, hospital space, boutique space, all of it, to embrace the good of the medical wellness arena, right? The connecting of the dots to the healthcare system. And I do think the industry has matured just by virtue of demand of folks. The consumer kind of drives the models that we live and breathe in sometimes. And I've seen an adaptation in the last couple of years, right before COVID, this huge boon of boutiques, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the consumer fostered a lot of that, where I don't necessarily want to join a gym and have access to everything, the wellness center, rec center, YMCA model. I really want yoga, or I want Pilates, or I want cycling, those kinds of things. I do think on the heels of all that growth, with where we are now and what we've experienced with the pandemic, I almost feel like we're going to do a full circle, Mike. We're going to come right back around, and we're going to lean into the full service operations where we can meet all ages and stages that have needs for services and programs that you and I know how to deliver. So I think we've pulled out some of the good things in the growth, understanding that specialization has a place, and those boutique facilities, it's not one size fits all for anything that we do. But I do think COVID has spurred us on to a new level of growth, and I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, that's been a theme on a lot of my podcasts recently, this conversation of the growth that's coming out of COVID for our industry. And I hear Margaret Moore use a term, Margaret Moore from Wealth Coaches use the term post-traumatic growth. She talks about this. And I feel like our industry has undergone some of that post-traumatic growth, but it's very interesting for you to talk about that pendulum that swung from, it was the big multi-purpose clubs, and then it's the small boutique clubs. And now the pendulum is kind of going back in the other direction. With that being said, why is that such a good thing for the medical wellness, medical fitness model, for the pendulum to be swinging back that way?
That's a great question. I think fundamentally, if we step back and look at the facts that are before us as a nation, if I take a broad lens conversation around it, the economics of the obesity epidemic for America is something that we all need to look at from a business lens. So in an organizational lens, looking at the universe of what our reality is, by 2030, it's forecasted that 50% of Americans will have a diagnosis of obesity. We know the cost of obesity to an employer-sponsored health plan far exceeds the average cost of a healthy American, which is about $3,600 a year on a health plan. If you have an obese individual on your employer-sponsored health plan, it could go anywhere from $10,000 and beyond, depending on how many metabolic conditions they present with, right? So the economic conversation around the health of the nation, I think the joy for the medical wellness industry is the 80-20 rule, is that we know in medical wellness what we need to do to meet people where they are. And I think that's a degree of sophistication that we can lend to others in the industry that want to get into the space. And so what I mean by that, the nuts and bolts, is you and I know how to meet an individual where they are, that maybe just got a diagnosis from their doc that they are needing exercise, they are overweight, they're out of shape, they're going to be adding another blood pressure medicine if they don't start moving soon. Those kinds of things. In all reality, that is the vast majority of our universe. And if we step back and just look at our respective communities, look at your own family, a mom, a dad, a loved one that's got a diagnosis of something, hypertension, diabetes, a high BMI, whatever the case may be. Upon leaving the doctor's office, where is that person going to go to seek lifestyle education, healthy living education, to truly meet them where they are? And that's where I think the medical wellness piece has so much to offer the industry in a broader sense, because we lean into the population health. I think we go looking for those that don't believe they can, who really need us. And so we're really not targeting the highly motivated individual that goes and picks the CrossFit gym because they already know they love exercise, right? I think it's a little different. So I think we can share our expertise across the entire industry right now. And I think the industry is ready, which is great. It's a great outcome of what we've been going through.
Yeah. And I'm definitely keen to dive more into that. The thesis behind my entire podcast is that fitness and wellness professionals need to be part of the healthcare continuum on a much broader basis than they are. And there's work we need to do to get there. And we're going to dive into that as we get towards the middle parts of this conversation. But you've been using the term well-being, and medical wellness. And when I heard you lecture in San Antonio, you basically gave a lecture where you talked about the difference between well-being and wellness. And obviously that's a critical part of this pair of medical and wellness. So before we actually get into that model, why don't you unpack the distinction for us between well-being and wellness, and maybe where we need to start to shift our perspective towards?
Mm-hmm. So to that point, I do believe there's been a shift. I think, I spent in South Carolina and North Carolina both. So 22 years as a director of wellness for a hospital system, working in building wellness programs for our own employees, for employees of other companies, community wellness, which was basically embracing churches, schools, businesses, just generic out in the universe. And of course, our medical wellness center where we had medical wellness programs. In starting that journey 22 years ago, the term was wellness. It was wellness. So we developed and delivered wellness programs. And I would say almost always, when we got a new contract, a new employer to take care of their folks, our wellness program for the employees always started with exercise. So to your point, Mike, there's been a mind shift in the universe. And it's both at an individual level and an organizational level. Because I can say to you, working corporate wellness, employers are also changing their language. As we are as individuals, it is not the wellness world anymore like I knew it and grew up in it. It truly has shifted, this whole mind shift, into the space of well-being. So wellness is, the definition is creating intention around choosing a healthy lifestyle, which encompasses exercise, nutrition, social health, behavioral health, all those kinds of things. And the well-being definition is more a sense of feeling satisfied and content with our lives. And a lot of that comes from a degree of social connectedness and knowing what your purpose is in this world and having joy every day. And it's a very different conversation, right? So what that means to us in the industry, we now need to be challenged in our evolution of how we look at what we do to motivate individuals to good health. I don't believe the solution necessarily is start with exercise anymore. I believe the mind shift that we're experiencing using the well-being language and meeting people where they are means really getting to know who Mike is. And if Mike comes to me and the doctor said, Mike, your blood pressure is rising, don't want to give you another medicine, maybe a little exercise or a little stress reduction or take some salt out of your diet. Our role would be to meet Mike where he is. So where does Mike want to start, right? Maybe Mike doesn't want to join a gym. Maybe Mike wants to learn some healthy cooking tips and put the salt shaker away. It's that kind of thing. And so I think the well-being conversation is much more exciting. I believe it could be a lot more inclusive because it doesn't lean into start with exercise for me, based on my experience. So I think the well-being is a more global definition and a more accurate representation of where folks are on the heels of the pandemic. It has created a lot of conversation, a lot of reprioritization of work-life balance. What are my values? What matters most to me? Am I a title and a salary? Or am I a title, a salary, a daughter, a great neighbor, a walking bud? What is it that makes Debbie happy and motivate her every day to meet people where they are? So I'm pretty excited about this new well-being definition that I think individuals are embracing more and organizations in general are as well.
Yeah, it seems much more, in one sense, it's much more comprehensive and much more broad based, but on another sense, it's much deeper than some of the superficial things that we talked about before.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you feel that depth is so important?
I believe at this point, and that's a really good observation, Mike. I think at this point, the depth is coming to us from a place of what we've experienced in the pandemic. The first thing that comes to mind is the isolation factor.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everybody stay home, live and breathe in four walls, do everything in that space, have everything delivered to you. I think the isolation is a driving factor of this well-being conversation because people need social connectedness and interaction with others. And again, the one size doesn't fit all. So I think finding out what that is about and how we meet people where they are with it, I think the isolation is a key indicator of well-being. So wanting to get out of the home, wanting to live our lives again, wanting to travel, wanting to be with others. And then I think there's something around the fear that this pandemic has created that has also spurred on, what is it that I'm doing here on this universe? You know, what is my purpose? I've had a lot of time to be isolated at home with a complete shutdown. Some folks went back to work in 6 weeks. Some people went back in 3 months. Some still haven't gone back. These conversations of the isolation and the fear factor, and then just sprinkling in the conversation of the value of good health to live a life that you really want to live. So I think at the core of a human being, there is this inner athlete and this inner spirit that wants to live life. I do believe that. But I think as we grow up, you know, one of the slides I shared at the MFA convention in my PowerPoint was on the heels of the pandemic, we're going through a systemic burnout nationwide. And if you look at that definition, and in my session, I played it back to, you know, looking at burnout, just being exhausted, not being appreciated, not believing you can, not being the person that is chosen to do. If we run that reel back in our head and we look at individuals, your experience growing up as an individual, if Mike didn't get picked for the basketball team because he was too short, Mike's first encounter possibly with exercise, being part of a group, being part of a team, loving movement, all of these things that grow up with us or they don't, end up being an adult where you believe you can. And I think the fear factor that the pandemic has created is that life is short. At a really deep level, the isolation, the fear, stepping back and having time to evaluate and reflect deep in our cores, maybe the awakening is life isn't guaranteed. Life is really short. Why am I here? What do I want to do? What makes me happy? So I think a lot of us are processing that way. And I think the outcome of that will be to create opportunities in our centers that go beyond exercise. I think that's where it's moving us.
Yeah, it's very exciting. And I agree that inflection point is there. And what interests me to talk about next with you is we have a wide variety of fitness and wellness professionals that listen to this podcast. We have people who are in a gym at Planet Fitness and Crunch. We have people who are in medical fitness centers. We have wellness coaches in hospitals, everywhere on the spectrum. Can you, for a second, talk to maybe the people that are on that spectrum that maybe aren't necessarily wellness professionals or not necessarily in a medical fitness center per se? How does everything you just said inform their practice as maybe just a fitness and exercise professional?
That's a great question. So I think it is the opportunity to fill the gap. It's an opportunity to do more than you've been doing. It's an opportunity to look at the ways you've been doing things and understand it's a white slate right now. Just because your center did this in the past and offered ABC does not mean you cannot now add D, E, and F. You can rebrand, you can relabel, you can get into the wellness programming business in any center, a boutique center, a rec center, a Y center. I think it's an opportunity for folks to do a lot more than they've been doing to increase their market outreach, to increase their revenues, to increase the stickability, the retention in your center. The retention comes from engagement. And when you can create opportunities in your center to engage folks with other like-minded folks, whether it be having a chess club in your center, or beginner fitness, or a walking club, or whatever it is, it's wide open right now. So stop doing what you've been doing. Look at doing something more. And what does your community need? What do you hear at church that people need? Just be open and go for it. I think it's just so much opportunity to layer in some new opportunities around programming.
Yeah, it's a perspective shift is what I hear you're saying. It's that I think for so long, and look, I'm much like you were a Group X instructor when you started your career. Yeah, I was a personal trainer. I've been in the industry for 23 years. And I think when I was early in my career, and this may be similar for you, I had a story that I told myself around what I was and what I did. And I'm like, I'm the person that helps people strength train. Like that was the story I told myself. And as my career went on, I started to broaden my perspective to say, you know what, I can develop the skills to help other people in other ways. And that happened on an individual level for me. It happened on an individual level for you. I feel like what you're saying is that this pandemic and everything that's came out of it has been a seismic shift for everyone in our industry to be at that inflection point to say, no, I'm more than just the person that teaches somebody how to squat, because that might not be what everybody needs.
Agreed, 1,000%. So let me dive into that a little bit. You've nailed it on the head, Mike. So here's how I look at this. You and I both, and everyone listening to this, have invested our lives into our careers to help others, right? And I think a lot of us, if not most of us still, probably started in the industry with a love of movement and a love of people, wanting to help others, right? A good day is when you know that you truly helped somebody feel better, do better. Maybe by virtue of them training with you, they got to do a hike with their family that they never thought they could do. That's why I'm in this business. And I think most of us are. I really, really believe that. So having said that, if we dive into this concept, if we step back and we evaluate and we look at what we bring to the table, we are so much more than Group X instructors and personal trainers. And I still teach Group X to this day because I love to teach. It makes me happy, right? Let's just, dive into the Group X piece of this. So Group X instructors who are listening, you are leaders. You are people. You know how to motivate. You have musicality. You know how to do program design, right? If someone said, okay, Deb, you're going to do a TRX class. Got it. I know I need a warm up, a workout, a cool down. I know I need to give different levels of options for beginner, intermediate, advanced, so forth and so on. You've got a potential sales ability to you because you believe in what you do. So if you look at that, and personal trainer is the same, look at all those skills that you bring. So to your point, this huge shift that we're in and this white slate for me, we need to upskill. The world is our oyster right now. It is a tsunami of need, and programming, I think, is the thing that we need to embrace so we can get more people moving, feeling better, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think it's just our huge opportunity to take the skill set that we have, layer in maybe a little bit more, and reach more people is basically what I would recommend.
Yeah. And that upskill piece, I think, is so important. And that's really one of my fundamental premises behind this podcast is helping those professionals upskill. And I think in diving into that a little further, you mentioned it earlier, and then it came up just a second ago in what you said, but I think it's important to speak to it more specifically. For decades, as a whole, as an industry, and this is a large generalization, but it's pretty accurate, we have gotten the fit fitter. And you talked about the 20-80 rule. We've got 20% of our population that are engaging with us. Just talk for a second on the 80% that don't engage with health and fitness clubs and fitness and wellness professionals. How does everything you're talking about right now relate to connecting with that 80%?
That's a great question. So again, it's a paradigm shift. If we want to reach that 80% that is sitting on the couch, has yet to engage and really, really needs us, I mean, really needs our help, right? Then we have to put ourselves in their shoes, understand their journey, their psyche, their challenges, their fears, and have those conversations. We cannot approach, well, we'll build it and they'll come. No, wrong. No, not for that 80%. That is not accurate, because those folks don't come to table like Mike and Debbie do with, I got this. Yeah, give me a challenge. I can do that CrossFit class. I grew up in a family that exercised. I've been mostly healthy. I got this. This is not the psyche that we're trying to appeal to. So that's where changing our lens and our approach for the 80% that has yet to engage, that really does need us. So that is the population that probably did not grow up with a good exercise experience and or an opportunity. It might be that they grew up in their formative years in a family that was more artistic or played musical instruments or all kinds of different things. Maybe they grew up in a family that farmed, so their exercise was farming, those kinds of things, right? But then we become adults and we need other things to do to make sure that we stay active. So I think the joy of the work in working with that 80% that don't believe they can, have never experienced it, don't really want to, exercise, that blah, I don't want to sweat. That's where the pure joy and the magic comes into this for me, Mike, is that the opportunity to hear their needs, to meet them where they are, and to create programming opportunity where it doesn't start with exercise necessarily, right? It's just creating a group of like-minded folks where they can come and be with a group that is morbidly obese. And the conversation starts with just getting through our daily life activities, doing some stairs, going to the mailbox without being winded, coming off of medicine, maybe just learning to eat a little bit better. Those kinds of things, I think, is the key. And so you have to understand who and what that 80% is, right? So who is it? What are their challenges? And how do you step into their boots and meet them where they are to, over time, make them feel better to be able to live the life that they want to live, whatever that might be. So it's not prescribing something that, well, this is the class, it's a 30-minute step class, this is what we do, take it or leave it. It's just a very different approach. But I think that's the joy in the work, because you get to be the human being.
You said it. It's looking at things through a different lens. And the thing that I'm struck by, and you and I have been doing this for a while, and I think we have this perspective, and I know, speaking for myself, I didn't have it when I was younger. The thought that someone didn't enjoy exercise or movement, or the thought that they couldn't do exercise or movement, or even the thought they didn't feel comfortable walking through the door of a gym was so foreign to me, because much like you, I'm just excited to be in those kinds of environments. I think that's hard for people that have grown up with a degree of physicality and who enjoy exercise. So that shifting the lens is important, but it's also hard.
Mm-hmm. It is, and for the folks that are on the call that are in the operations space, let me challenge some thoughts. And, again, as we all shift our paradigm of what health, wellness, well-being looks like, and we all hold hands in all the different spaces to connect to our healthcare providers, because we all need to do it. those, you go to a doctor's appointment, they don't have time, 15 minutes of time. Where does the doctor refer a patient that has need for what we provide, right? I think in the operations spaces, not only do we have to embrace the nation as it is right now and accommodate for all the things that we've endured, isolation, fear, maybe we didn't exercise while the pandemic was going, we got depressed and we stopped exercising. Maybe we're motivated to start again, all these things that we can embrace and create centers to accommodate these lifestyle opportunities, so to speak. Take a broader lens of your center and maybe just know that you have such power by virtue of the fact that you have a space, whether you're a boutique, a Y, commercial, rec center, I don't care. Just take a broader lens to what it is that the amazing stuff that you provide a community. So be known as the lifestyle center in your community. Yeah, you might be the boutique cycle club, but take a broader lens. You are a lifestyle center. You are an advocacy center. You are a social center, right? Think about it. Everybody wants different things, but at the end of the day, if we're all holding hands to improve the health of our communities, which I call population health, but that's just my medical wellness background. All that means is improving the health of a community, right? However we get there. Take a broader lens, be more in your center, and even consider offering programs that will bring folks in rather than a one and done model. Start thinking about programming. I promise you, you will not regret it. A 4-week program, reset your health. Something simple. You have the expertise. It can be 1 day a week that you meet for 4 weeks, and lesson 1, the folks can come in and do 30 minutes of lecture and 30 minutes of movement, charge a fee just enough to cover the cost of the instructor, just to get out of the gates, and nail it. And have people start talking about, wow, I did this program with Mike in January. It was called Reset Your Health. It was $25 and I didn't have to join the gym. I just did this program and I brought my girlfriends and, it was really fun. I kind of like everybody there. I think I'm going to join the gym. This is the opportunity that I see for all on this call. And at a really nuts and bolts level, be mindful of who you're hiring, right? The folks that are engaging with your potential audience. I lean very heavily into highly credentialed individuals because I was in the hospital space for 22 years. So I was very blessed. I had 2 dietitians on my team, a nurse, master's degree exercise physiologist. You don't need all that. You just need to work top a license. So whatever you have, whomever you have on your team, upskill them. I'm going to use the word again. Pull the best out of them and challenge them to get a little bit out of their comfort zone. So yeah, Mike, you personal train 20 hours a week and you teach 2 kettlebell classes. What do you think about doing a strength training program for women over 50, a 4-week program in January? What do you think? You got the skill, these kinds of things, right? So stop doing what you've been doing, not exactly, but kind of sort of. Think about doing more to meet people where they are so that your center becomes more than it was before the pandemic. I just think there's so much opportunity here. You can tell this is my passion, right? Because it's like, can I just help you get going with all that? But I think that's part of it. Having good talent, instructors of different ages and stages. Have some 60-year-old instructors. Have some instructors that are not the freaking skinny mini. That makes me crazy, right? You cannot just have 20-year-old instructors if you want an audience that's going to cover the ages and stages. And let me say to everyone on this call, if you're not programming for the 55 and up, who have the bucks, who have the time, who might have a renewed interest in their health post-pandemic, get on it. Get on it. I'm in that demographic and I don't want anything to do with someone saying, hey, would you like a seniors exercise class? I'm sorry, I'm almost 60. I'm not a senior, right? All of these things are our oyster right now to just run with it. There's so much we can do.
I love it. I love it. And if the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, I feel like our industry has been doing that for decades. We've been hiring the same people that look the same way, that have been doing the same things, and we're getting the same people, but we're talking about getting the other 80%. And the thing that I loved about everything that you just said is it's one thing for you at your medical wellness center to have all of these resources and to be able to put together these amazing programs. But what you just did for everyone listening is you made it approachable for the non-medical fitness professionals out there to start to develop these similar programs. And I just want to focus on that for another moment to make sure it's a great takeaway for our audience. When someone's considering developing one of these programs that would be more approachable to that 80%, how should they think about doing that? Is there a framework or a model that you think of when you're developing this kind of programming?
There is, that's another great question, Mike. I don't want to box anybody in and say there's only one way, because that is so not the truth. I think this is where the creativity and the license to hear the need and customize a solution, I would always advocate for that. Mm-hmm. But to answer your question, yes, I do believe there is a framework. I think I've called it the 4 C's of programming. And I literally just developed that after, you and I did MFA together in October, because I've been thinking and reflecting about my work and how is it I've made these programs happen that have been so successful year over year and produce the health outcomes that I define as success. So success to me is you joined my weight loss program, you lost weight. Mm-hmm. You joined my diabetes program and we helped you reduce your A1C and move better, right? Those kinds of things. So in the health outcomes space. So the 4 C's of programming, I'm going to try and remember these off the top of my head. So content, number 1, decide what the program is going to be. So what is the 4-week program about? Reset your health, feel better, move more, eat better, sleep better, zoom out. I had all these different program ideas in my session at MFA. A great program right now that every gym could jump on, holy cow, would be to reduce the impact of zooming. The sitting position, the neck strain, the eye strain, all of that, man, that would be a great 4-weeker to teach you how to set up your desk right, neck stretches to reduce the sitting at the computer all day long, those kinds of things. So there was content is number 1. What is the program? Commitment, number 2, be sure that whatever it is you're launching, you do have commitment from your leadership. Now, if you're this sole proprietor of your boutique studio, good. But if you are Debbie, the wellness coordinator, or the personal training coordinator at Mike's gym, then Mr. Mike, the owner, has to commit to the vision and the idea that we're moving into the programming space. What were the other 2? There was content, commitment. I think collaboration was on my list, Mike, and that was learning to work top of license. And if you got to top of license and you get stuck, then collaborating with the experts who could fill the gap. So if I was doing a women's strength training program and for some reason I wanted one lesson on powerlifting and I've never had any experience or education, I would call Mike and say, hey, Mike, I want lesson 7 of 8 to expose the women in my group to powerlifting. I've got a couple that are interested. Could you be my speaker? So, you learn to reach out outside of your scope. So you're not limited by your skill set necessarily, but you start to resource, relationally expand your network so you can invite others to support your vision and your programming. And I don't remember what my 4th was. I apologize, but it was the 4 C's: content, commitment, collaboration. I'll have to send it to you and you can sprinkle it in for me. I just literally framed it up because I'm launching a new course. Maybe it'll come to me in the next minute or so.
I love it though. And in all honesty, I wasn't expecting you to have a specific framework like that. I was just looking to somehow frame this up in our listeners' mind to say, how do I approach this? Because clearly you have decades of experience in the industry. So do I. And I think for us, a lot of this program development is somewhat intuitive. It's just like we know how to do it by now. But I think for a lot of the professionals that are listening to this, the idea of come up with a program to work with people that you're not used to working with, I think it's in a very intimidating place to go. And the three things you said, I don't know what the fourth C is. I'm sure it's really good, but the ability to know the content, know your subject matter and what you're going to do. I couldn't agree more with the commitment piece of it, because it's a new thing and it's not going to return a result right away necessarily. And the collaboration is so key. And the concept of top of license or scope of practice is typically how I refer to it. So important. But one other thing that I want to hit on, and it goes back to something you said earlier, is traditionally these programs are not a part of membership. Typically, these are a program that are just charged for separately. Talk about why that's so important for a moment.
Great. Yes, very much. So number 4 is culture.
Culture.
It just came to me as I sat back and listened. You got my, yep. So thank you for that. So yes, that's a great question. I believe, based on my experience, both in commercial fitness clubs, which I have extensive experience in as well in my younger years, and YMCA experience. I started my career at the Y in Ottawa. All of it combined, I do believe in the try before you buy model. I absolutely believe in that. And you just hit on something too that really resonates with me, Mike, is that you don't get results necessarily after the first program. So in the try before you buy model, you want to allow people to experience you and your facility, maybe at a lesser price point. So it doesn't have to be a full-on 12-month membership equals $600 out of my checking account that I'm like, I don't know that I want to do that, but I really do want to feel better. And this 4-week program is $25 or $50. I think I'll start there. So the opportunity there is to relationally, forgive me for this expression, but date each other for a little while before we get married, right? It's like, I don't know that I'm going to like this facility or the staff here, or I'm not going to feel like I belong. But if I just come in to do this program, whatever it is, I get to meet the front desk staff every time I come in. And you know what? Gosh, every time I come here, Mike's like, hey, Deb, how's your day? We haven't seen you in a couple of days. Everything good? How are you enjoying the program? I feel a bond with the folks in this center. And this is the relational piece of our work, which is so critical. We cannot undermine that piece. We are not selling personal training, folks. We are not selling memberships. We are selling relationships. We are in the service industry. We are meeting needs for folks that we probably don't even know the extent of how people need us so desperately to feel better, right? So the try before you buy, for me, is everything. I really believe in that. And that you do need these shorter term commitments to get to the longer term commitments. And so my experience, I have never wavered from that in any of the centers I was responsible for, where you could just come take the program and not have to join the gym. Absolutely program like that. It will produce downstream revenue and an ancillary service line revenue for you in each of your centers, but you do have to commit. That's the commitment piece, Mike, that you just referenced. If you only do one program a year, it's not going to work. So go into it with the lens of the commitment, also at the level that this is an annual calendar of activity. One program and another program. There's always a program running, right? It's part of your culture to offer these programs.
Yeah. And just so people aren't thinking of this in a short-sighted fashion when they hear lower price points for some of these programs, the thing that I'm struck by as a business owner in the industry is my cost of acquisition for a single member is astronomically high. And these type of programs, in my mind, they actually shift the paradigm on cost of acquisition to where you actually can make a little bit of money on acquisition in some of those cases. Yeah, maybe they're not buying the $50 per month membership right off the bat, but maybe they do sign up for this program. Sure, some of them won't continue on, but the percentage that do, now all of a sudden, instead of that acquisition costing you $400 or $500, you've made $50 on it.
Right. And I'll share with you my experience in the North Carolina Center. Our medical wellness programs, I had 9 built out by the time I left that system. Of those 9, we didn't require memberships for any of them. Our cancer wellness, our diabetes wellness, our weight loss program, our healthy back, our golf fit pro was in there because we had someone on staff that was very accomplished in golfing. None of those required a membership. So they were price point, whatever they were, based on a 4-week model, an 8-week pre and post testing for all of them. We always measured, right? Don't run programs without measuring things. You won't get any grant monies if you do that. But where I was going with this is those programs always converted at a 30 to 40% level. So if I had 25 people, which I always ran my weight loss program every quarter, at least 25 people, $125 per program when I left the system, I would convert without even trying. There's no hard sell in that. They didn't want to leave us. They had found their sweet spot where they had other people in the gym that were overweight, out of shape. Nobody's running around with midriffs exposed. I mean, they had found their place to be at home in health. Ooh, that's a good expression, right? Write that down, Mike.
Got it. It's yours. It's yours. You get to keep it.
So yeah, for the individuals on the phone thinking on the call, dollars, a 30 to 40% conversion rate of those try before you buy folks into your membership model. And then once you've got them, we all know they buy other things, right? So yes, it works. It works. I'm saying this from experience. It works. You just got to get out of your own way and get going and give it a go.
Yeah, it's such an interesting way to view things. And I feel like you and I can go down so many different rabbit holes on many of these topics, but we try to be respectful of our listeners' time and our guest time and not keep going too long. So I have a feeling you're going to be coming back for a part 2 and a part 3 at some point. But but for now, before we get to the final question that I always had the podcast on, I'm sure that many people listening may want to find out more about you and what you're doing and maybe how some of your expertise can help them. Where can people go if they want to find out more about you and all the great things you're doing?
Yes. So I have my website, which is being updated and upgraded, so to speak, which is super exciting. www.debbiebellenger.com. So it's easy. It's my name.
Yep.
Simple, easy peasy. And you can go there and find the new courses that I'll be offering starting January. And I'm going to be able to support groups that are interested in how do you get started. If you want to run your first wellness program, you can join me in an 8-week course. I'll teach you that. If you want to break into the corporate wellness model as a Group X Fit Pro and add some revenue to your revenue stream as it sits right now, I'm going to teach you that as well. So that's what I'm starting with in the new year. And as we discussed, Mike, I'm clearly available for consulting services. If there's a broader ask where you have a new center and or you just kind of want to understand and have someone help you through programming out of the gates, please do reach out, and I'm here to help. I'm very much of the mind that we need to give back to our industry, right? And so I look forward to partnering with anyone that has need.
Awesome. Lots of ways to help get inside of Debbie's brain and learn what she's learned from her career. Debbie, before we end, the last question that I always conclude the podcast on is my thesis behind the podcast. And I know this is one that resonates with you quite a bit, which is there is a trust, interaction, and communication gap between fitness and wellness professionals and medical professionals. That's how I define the wellness paradox. Given your vast experience, what's the one piece of advice you would leave fitness and wellness professionals with to close off that gap?
Oh, it's so hard. I wrote about 10 things down. I have to pick one. Let me think. I'm going to say learn your audience is the one thing. Learn your audience. So in filling the gap between healthcare and fitness, It's learn the audience. And what I mean by that is in a servant leadership model, we need to meet people where they are and give them what they need. And that means hearing them, however it is. So in the partnership with healthcare providers, it's leaning into the needs of that 80% that maybe don't even know what they need. And for us to be the group that can receive them and almost express the need for them, right? Like, Mike, we've got you. We know you just got a high blood pressure diagnosis. The doctor said exercise. We've got you. They don't know what they need. They're afraid, right? So I think learning your audience is where I want to leave this conversation. Like you said, you and I could talk for hours, but I hope that resonates with the audience. I hope that makes sense. I think that's the key.
Awesome. Learn your audience. Debbie Bellenger, thank you so much for joining us on the Wellness Paradox.
My pleasure.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Debbie as much as I did. If you found it insightful and valuable, please share with your friends and colleagues. Those shares really make a difference for us. Any information that we would like to share with you can be found on the show notes page. You can go to wellnessparadoxpod.com/episode 38 for that information. Please be on the lookout for next week's episode when it drops on Wednesday. And if you have a moment, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast platforms. Those reviews are so critical to growing our podcast. Until we chat again next week, please be well.